Bear down, fam. 33 takeaways, number one in the entire NFL in 2025. And today, Adam Schefter went on his podcast and said that number is about to collapse in 2026. In a minute, I'll break down why he's only half right. Because the real problem isn't the turnovers drying up. It's the $50 million Ryan Poles buried in an edge rusher who managed one measly sack before blowing out his Achilles. And that's going to explain the crack in this defense nobody's fixing yet. Colston Loveland just landed on an NFL PA list no other Bear even sniffed. Not Caleb, not Odunze, nobody. And the reason his year two could be even bigger than his rookie season is about to flip the whole conversation about this offense. And to close it out, there's a quiet war brewing at Hollis Hall for the starting center job between an Iowa rookie and the veteran Poles traded for back in March. And the number that rookie picked for his jersey hasn't been worn in Chicago since Brian Urlacher walked away, a detail that changes the entire outlook at that position. Bear down, fam. Let's get into it. Okay, fam, walk with me on this one because the argument has several layers, and I want you to see all of them before jumping to conclusions, which is exactly what the national media is doing right now. First, the numbers nobody disputes. In 2025, the Chicago Bears defense finished number one in the entire league in takeaways, with 33 balls stolen between interceptions and recovered fumbles. That number carried an entire season. The Bears won games that, on paper, they had no business winning, and the main reason was simple. They took the ball away at the exact moment the opponent started building momentum. Adam Schefter came out this week on his podcast questioning whether that repeats. And look, I am not going to pretend his argument has zero logic, because it does. He said it is going to be hard for that takeaway pace to hold, and that if turnovers drop, points allowed per game are going to climb to make up for what the team pulled off last year, when they allowed 24.4 points per game, but got saved by the turnovers. That is a regression to the mean argument. Turnovers, statistically, are one of the most volatile stats in football. Nobody sustains a takeaway rate that high year after year without major changes to the roster. But here is the problem with what Schefter said, and this is where I, as a fan who actually breaks this stuff down, have to get critical. His argument assumes the secondary roster stayed the same. It did not. Kevin Byard III, who led the entire league in interceptions last season, is no longer in Chicago. Nashan Wright, who led the entire league in total takeaways, is also gone. Those two players by themselves accounted for 22 of the 33 takeaways the team produced. So just saying turnovers are going to drop without mentioning that the two biggest generators of those turnovers already packed their bags is, to me, an incomplete analysis. Schefter is not lying. He is being lazy. And that brings me to the detail that actually matters, the one the national media is completely underselling. The Bears retained Al Harris. Listen up on this one, because to me, this is the single most underrated move of the entire Chicago offseason. Bigger than any signing, bigger than any draft pick. And I will admit that one hurt a little to say out loud, because I was fixated on second-round picks myself when this news first came out. Al Harris is the defensive backs coach and defensive pass game coordinator, and he had multiple offers to become a defensive coordinator somewhere else. He could have left. He chose to stay with Ben Johnson for the 2026 season, and once you look at this man's track record of generating takeaways, luck and coincidence stop being part of the conversation pretty fast. What is left is a pattern that repeats no matter where he goes. When Harris was running the secondary in Dallas, that Cowboys team led the NFL in takeaways in 2021 and again in 2022. 2 different seasons, 2 different rosters, same result. And that same trend carried over to Chicago last year. At that point, we are no longer talking about a statistical coincidence. We are talking about a coaching pattern that survives every roster turnover. And Ben Johnson said it in plain words this week that Harris has a way of teaching his guys to be in the right spot and take the ball away. And that has been his calling card since Dallas all the way through now. So here's my central point. And I want you to really hear this because it goes against the narrative being sold on national television. The system that generates the takeaways did not leave with the players. The system stays with Al Harris. What actually changes are the names executing that system. And that is where this conversation actually gets interesting. The replacements Chicago brought in are Kobe Bryant, first-round pick Dylan Thieneman, Devin Bush, and Malik Muhammad, on top of a fully healthy Jalen Johnson for a full season, Kyler Gordon, and hopes for a leap in quality from Tariq Stevenson. I am going to be honest with you, fam. I do not expect Bryant and Thieneman to generate the same volume of takeaways that Byard and Jaquan Brisker generated last year. That level of veteran ball production is hard to replicate with young players in their first year in the system. But here is my conditional prediction, and I am putting my neck out on this one. If Harris gets this new secondary playing with the same coverage discipline the old group played with, they are going to be more consistent in stopping the pass, even if they generate fewer spectacular interceptions. And that, in the metric that actually matters for winning playoff games, might end up being more valuable than a lucky fumble recovery in the regular season. Now here comes the part where I have to be the critical fan, and not just the fan who defends the team no matter what. Because there is a real problem here, one Al Harris cannot solve with coverage teaching alone, and that is the pass rush. The Bears finished 2025 with only 35 sacks. Only 6 teams in the entire league had fewer. 35 sacks across 16 games is no sugarcoating it, a number that tells you this defense is not generating consistent pressure. Montez Sweat led the team with 10 sacks, which is fine but not elite-level production for an edge rusher who is supposed to be the centerpiece of the pass rush. And the second highest sack total on the team belonged to Jervin Dexter, an interior defensive tackle with 6. When your second best pressure generator is an interior defensive tackle and not an edge rusher, that tells me the perimeter pass rush simply is not working the way it needs to. And this connects directly to something I have been saying on this channel for months. Ryan Poles spent almost $50 million on Dayo Odeyingbo last offseason, and in 8 games, he managed just 1 sack before tearing his Achilles in Week 9 against the Bengals and losing the rest of his season entirely. I want to be fair here, because it would be easy to use that contract purely as ammunition. Part of that lack of production was not simply bad play. It was a serious injury that took him out of the equation mid-season. But my criticism still stands, because $50 million at a position of that much need cannot ride entirely on one player's health. And that is exactly the kind of risk Poles needs to stop taking if he actually wants to fix this problem for good. Austin Booker, who also lost time to injury, finished with 4.5 sacks in 10 games, which, to be fair, is not bad on a rate basis, but it does not make up for the lack of production from the rest of the group. And this is exactly why I keep insisting on this channel that Chicago needs a real edge rusher through the trade market, whether that is somebody at the level of Max Crosby if he ever becomes available, or somebody like Josh Sweat. Because you cannot rely on your secondary stealing the ball to cover for a pass rush that is not applying consistent pressure on the quarterback. I could be wrong, but to me that is the number one vulnerability on this defense heading into 2026, bigger than any talent question in the secondary. That is where the question Sports Illustrated raised actually deserves an answer. Chicago's defense finished 21st in EPA allowed per play and 26th in opponent success rate. Translated into normal language, that means play after play, the opponent was moving the ball successfully against the Bears more often than against most defenses in the league. The Bears just kept closing those drives out with a takeaway before the opponent could fully capitalize. That is a dangerous pattern because it depends on luck and coverage discipline, continuing to cover for a pass rush that structurally is not there yet. And here, fam, I want to be careful about something, because I like to back my analysis with real numbers, and I am not going to invent a stat just to make the point sound more dramatic. What I can tell you with what is actually verified is this: a pass rush that finished among the 6 worst in the league in total sacks, combined with a defense that Sports Illustrated placed in the bottom third of the league in both EPA allowed and opponent success rate, is exactly why 33 takeaways were enough to make the playoffs. When in any other year, with a different bounce of luck, that same combination of numbers could have sunk the team. I do not need to inflate the number to make the point land. This defense leaned on turnover luck more than any team with real aspirations should be comfortable leaning on it. There is also a real reason for optimism here, and I do not want to sound only negative. The defense allowed 227.2 passing yards per game, ranking 22nd in the league against the pass. With Jalen Johnson healthy for a full season, Kyler Gordon settled in, and the arrival of Thieneman and Bryant adding more coverage consistency, even if they produce fewer interceptions, that passing yards number could actually improve even as turnovers drop. In other words, this defense could become structurally more solid while looking less spectacular on the takeaway stat sheet. And that to me is the more realistic version of what is coming in 2026. My conclusion, and this is what I want you to take from this first story: Schefter is right that turnovers are going to drop. That is basic regression math. But he is wrong if he thinks that automatically means the whole defense gets worse. Al Harris is still the secret ingredient on this staff, and his track record proves the system survives roster turnover. The real test for Dennis Allen and this entire coaching staff in 2026 is not whether they steal 33 balls again. It is whether they finally solve the pass rush problem they have been dragging around for 2 seasons now. If they solve it, this defense can be better than last year, even with fewer turnovers. If they do not, they are going to need the luck to repeat itself, and luck, bro, is not a strategy. I needed that change of pace after all those defensive numbers because now it is time to talk about something that has me legitimately fired up about the Chicago offense heading into 2026, and that something is named Colston Loveland. The NFLPA released its Rising Stars list for 2026, the one that identifies rookies and second-year veterans projected to have breakout seasons, gain fan support, and end up among the top-selling names in officially licensed merchandise league-wide. And out of the entire Chicago Bears roster, the only name that shows up on that list is Loveland. Not Caleb Williams, not Rome Odunzo, nobody else, just him. And he is in the veterans category, not the rookie category, sharing space with names like Brock Bowers of the Raiders and Trey McBride of the Cardinals, two of the best young tight ends in the entire league. Let's put into context why that actually makes sense. If you saw what Loveland did as a rookie, he led the entire team in receiving yards with 713, led the team in catches with 58, and scored 6 touchdowns across 16 regular season games. And on top of that, in 2 playoff games, he added 12 more catches and 193 additional receiving yards. That kind of production does not belong to a complimentary tight end. It belongs to a player who, as a rookie, had already become Caleb Williams' primary target in the moments that mattered most, and I do not see that happen every year. And this brings me to something I want to say with full honesty, fam. I am usually skeptical when the media or lists like this start talking about a second-year player as if he is already an established star. I have seen too many guys ride premature hype and then fail to sustain the level, but with Loveland, this feels different. This feels real. And it is not just me saying it. Ben Johnson, a coach who is not known for handing out public praise for fun, said Loveland took his game to another level this offseason. When a head coach known for being calculated with his words says that about a specific player, you pay attention. Now here's the tactical part that I actually care about breaking down. With DJ Moore off the roster, the ball distribution in Ben Johnson's offense is going to shift in a significant way. That might sound concerning on the surface, like they lost a weapon, but to me, this actually speeds up the process of Loveland becoming Caleb Williams' number 1 option in critical situations. Opposing defensive coordinators are going to have to figure out how to cover him, knowing they can no longer simply funnel their best resources at the outside receivers and leave the middle of the field open for the tight end. If Loveland keeps producing at the same rate, or better, with more defensive attention on him, that confirms he was not a product of the system or of last year's circumstances. That would be the final proof that this is a genuinely elite player. And there is more evidence backing this projection up. Loveland also cracked ESPN's top 10 tight ends list, and there's already chatter about him playing his way toward an all-pro selection this season. I might be overselling my own excitement here a little, I will admit that, but when you combine the rookie production, the direct testimony from his own coach, and the outside recognition from the league itself through the NFLPA vote of his peers, it is hard not to get fired up. My conditional prediction for Loveland in 2026, if Ben Johnson genuinely redesigns the offense to get the ball into his hands more often, which the Moore departure practically forces him to do, Loveland finishes the season past 800 receiving yards and closing in on 10 touchdowns. And if that happens, the conversation around him stops being great rookie and turns into best young tight end in the NFL, ahead of even established names like Bowers and McBride. And to close out today's episode, let's talk about a story quietly brewing at Hallis Hall, far from the spotlight, but one that could end up being huge for Caleb Williams' protection in 2026. The Bears selected Logan Jones, a center out of the University of Iowa, with the 57th pick of this year's draft in the 2nd round. And here is a detail most people glossed over at the time. Both the Rams and the Ravens were watching Jones closely before Chicago took him off the board. When 2 organizations known for evaluating the offensive line well are chasing the same player, that tells you something about the level of that prospect. Now, Chicago's plan at the center position was a 2-pronged approach. They first traded for veteran Garrett Bradbury back in March, then drafted Jones a month later. The initial plan is for Bradbury to start while Jones learns the system. But the general expectation, including from Chicago Tribune reporter Sean Hammond, is that the job eventually belongs to the rookie. The question is not if Jones becomes the starting center. It is when. And here is where I want to be direct with you about Bradbury, because I'm not going to soften this. He's not a bad player, but he is also not a starter who gives you peace of mind. His Pro Football Focus grade last season, starting for the Patriots, was 60.1, ranking him 30th out of 40 centers league-wide. And his specific run-blocking grade was 56.2, ranking 35th. I want to flag this properly. It is a third-party grade, so take it with the usual caveat about PFF methodology, but the pattern lines up with what we already knew about Bradbury as an average center, not a long-term solution. And this reminds me directly of what happened last year with Ozzie Trapilo, when he had to step in as a rookie at left tackle, because of injuries to Braxton Jones and Theo Benedette, and it ended up being one of the best decisions Ben Johnson made all season. If history repeats itself, and Jones has to step in earlier than planned because Bradbury cannot hold up protecting Caleb Williams, Bears fans are not going to complain. If anything, it is going to feel like a good kind of déjà vu. Now here is the detail that genuinely gives me chills as a fan of this franchise. Logan Jones is going to wear number 54, and nobody on the Chicago Bears roster has worn that number since Brian Urlacher retired after the 2012 season. We are talking about a Hall of Famer, 5-time All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler, first ballot Hall of Fame inductee in 2018. Jones said he feels honored to carry that number and to keep people in the stands at Soldier Field thinking about Ehrlicher every time they see that 54 running around the field. That, to me, is exactly the kind of franchise identity detail that connects a second-round rookie to 91 years of Bears history before he has even played a single official snap. My position on this center battle is simple. I'm giving Jones a window of maybe 6 to 8 games to win the starting job, as long as Bradbury shows the same regression signs he showed in New England last year. If Bradbury plays better than his numbers suggest, Poles and Johnson probably let him finish the season as the starter, rather than rushing a rookie into a mentally demanding position like center too early. But if the first preseason games confirm what we already saw in Foxborough, this is going to be a fast changeover, and Chicago is going to have its center of the future protecting Caleb Williams a lot sooner than the original plan suggested. An episode of contrasts today, which is basically how it always goes with this team. A defense that won by stealing the ball last year and now has to prove it can win by actually generating pressure, with Al Harris as the most underrated piece on this entire coaching staff. A second-year tight end already getting the whole league talking about him before the season even starts. And a rookie center wearing a Legends number while quietly fighting for the most important job on the offensive line. This franchise stays the same in one way. It never gives you a simple story. There's always another layer to break down, another pattern to question, another reason to argue with whoever is sitting next to you watching the game. And honestly, fam, that is exactly how I like it. No sugarcoating, real arguments, and no fear of saying when something does not fully convince me. Bear down, always. If this video gave you something to think about, drop the like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments below, do you trust Al Harris to keep this defense afloat? Or do you think, without a real pass rush, this whole thing falls apart in 2026? I am reading every single one. See you in the next one.